Now, just when I thought Dan Henry was playing it safe with his 1945 chronograph, here he comes with another new release for 2022. But this time, it's a very ballsy move. It might even ruffle a few feathers, and dare I say, a subtle response to Amiga and the Swatch group, who essentially, well, let's call it as it is, did a Dan Henry on their own brand and made hundreds of millions of dollars. To say the least, this is going to be a very interesting episode. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today, a slightly different review. In a moment, we will be looking at the Skin Diver 1975, the new Dan Henry watch. In fact, 4 of them. But before I get into that, I also want to do this review a little differently, as we've extensively covered Dan Henry already once this year. If you missed it, have a look back at the 1945. But I really want to focus this mini review and video on analyzing just how Dan Henry keeps one step ahead always of the competition and even the big boy brands he takes inspiration from. Now, before we get into it, I will do a wristwatch check wearing the Fortis Cosmonaut on the Wrist Candy Watch Club rubber strap. Yeah, you've seen this combo before because of the matching buckle with the bead blasted finish. Oh, and by the way, guys, if you missed a little look at the Stratoliner, have a look at this Rolex video where I get Mark's reaction. When Dan Henry hit the scene in 2016 with his first releases, they were instant hits and changed the microbrand world forever. But how and why was it so revolutionary? Well, first, he was already something of a legend in the watch world. A collector of watches so prolific, his own watch collection spawned an entire free online encyclopedia with a highly intuitive, fun, and easy-to-use interface in chronological order that charts the backstory of each timepiece individually. So the name Dan Henry was already well established before it even appeared on the dial of a watch. This hands-on access to over 1,500 vintage timepieces also gave him a massive advantage over not only the microbrands, but the big boy traditional watchmakers too. He could pull from hundreds of references from just one decade alone and have them in hand to really understand the feel, sizes, dimensions, functionality, the use of color, from whatever took his fancy at the time. Not even the most illustrious brands have access to this many watches. They're usually confined, for obvious reasons, to their own back catalogue, whereas Dan has a gold mine to draw inspiration from. And this enables him to take vintage-inspired to a whole new level. Let's break down one of my favourite watches he ever made, to understand just what I mean here. Look at the 1962. The case is classic Amiga Speedmaster. The dial with hints of vintage Rolex Newman Daytona with the piston head markers, then blended masterfully with a universal Genève Evil Nina Compax handset and dial layout. To a watch snob, blinded by their own hatred, or simply their own horological ignorance, they will simply dismiss it as a speedy rip-off. Failing to notice all the iconic watches it pays homage to. To further ensure his watches were a big success, he made them super affordable, almost always under $300. Now, not AliExpress or Pagani designs affordable, but almost. One of his first chronographs, 1939 for example, utilized the quartz Miyota 6S21 and were produced in very high-end factories in China. However, the difference here was Dan was transparent about it, always overseeing the QC personally, unlike so many watch brands that try their hardest to hide where their watches are rarely made. And truth of the matter is, the majority of watches are actually made this way, even a vast proportion of so-called Swiss-made timepieces costing into the thousands. So, when you see those annoying comments, which there will always be, well, you could buy this, insert so-called nameless AliExpress brand for the same money, all the previous things discussed is what you're paying extra for, real QC and a real brand name, not to mention the creativity, time, talent and stylishness. in comparison to just another uninspired clone of another Submariner, Captain Willard or Speedy, and so on. This year we saw the biggest change in the watch market or watch industry in a long time. Love it or loathe it, we are living in a post-MoonSwatch watch world. I know it sounds crazy, but this is the biggest, most significant change, making Swiss watches more accessible to the mainstream since, well, the introduction of Swatch in the early 80s. And it's not a coincidence. Big business does this all the time. FedEx to UPS, Instagram and Snapchat, Alando and eBay, Xerox and Apple, CityDeal and Groupon. The list is endless. This is just the nature of business. Omega and their parent company Swatch went into their own archives, making a mass-producible quartz plastic version of the most iconic chrono of all time. You kind of have to admire the genius of it. And I wonder what's next, the plastic Bond Seamaster perhaps.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Dan's democratization of rare, extremely expensive, hard to find and typically fragile watches, in the way most vintage watches are, has now become a mainstream business strategy. The same can be said with YouTube. Before the urban Gentry, there was not really much watch-related content out there, certainly none with a lifestyle aspect. Today it's oversaturated with watch dealers and hucksters posing as watch enthusiasts, with the most vapid clickbait content to the point of ad nauseum. This is where you insert a Rich Evans, oh my god here, you know. A Rolex with a purple bezel this year, oh my god. You know, value proposition, value. Let's talk about value. Oh look, a 39mm Pelagos. Wasn't I saying there should be one like 5 years ago when I started at the beginning of the channel? Value. There's more to life than value. Oh, now there's the Ranger. Wait, I said that last year, right? Yeah, I said that last year. With Tudor putting T-Rexes in their advertising, it's not just limited to Dan Henry and Omega. Of course, we are not going to get a plastic Tudor sub anytime soon, but actually I wouldn't mind that happening, that kind of would be cool. But in a wonderful twist of carefully orchestrated genius, Dan's new watch for 2022 is inspired by an Omega no less. Yeah, that's right, the Omega Geneve Admiralty, reference ST135042. A largely forgotten skin diver that first debuted in 1968 and was discontinued in 1979 with the now disbanded Omega Geneva line. It was kind of a water-resistant do-it-all maritime-themed watch, as the name and anchor on the dial imply. It did not need the bulkier, deeper diving capability, but retained some of the diver legibility and style, and sacrificing that high water resistance for a more slender profile. Complete with a timing bezel, it was for swimming, boating, swanning around on one's yacht, more than a scuba suit. Think of it as a sporty, everyday maritime dress watch, if that makes any sense. And if you really think about it, it was very ahead of its time, almost a quarter of a century before the Rolex Yachtmaster, which basically is what I just described in motive and intention. There are four main color options, some in 39, some in 37, some no date, some automatic, some quartz. I mean, just that alone, the sheer amount of combinations, my dyslexic brain is having a slight meltdown. I don't even know how many. Can anyone count? Yeah, add it in the comments if you can figure it out. On top of the grandiosity and choice, there's a selection of either very impressively ultra-robust high-end FKM synthetic rubber straps with that nifty bolt-action spring bars, or a full steel solid end link bracelet for an extra $80. However, unfortunately with pin and collar links. You can even choose between different bezel colors and materials, some brushed steel and some fully loomed as well, and the latter really evoke the good old days of Bakelite. Dan is not making his life easier by offering so many options here, but it's great for the consumer. I can't even imagine the investment involved. Having taken part in designing 6 watches now, with a further dozen designs in the works in the coming years, it's a process that can take anywhere between 12 to 24 months and even longer, and that's just for a single design. This is a very bold move that many armchair watchmakers will simply not be able to fully appreciate the scale, cost, time, fortitude, etc. that makes it all possible. They say innovate or die. Well, Dan has chosen to innovate this time around by offering the most possible choices to a watch in an unprecedented scale. The automatic is a limited edition to ensure collectability, and for the quartz, a general release. A ballsy move indeed, especially with this more obscurely rooted design. So what are the negatives so far? Well, this wouldn't be an independent review if I didn't express my honest opinions, so let's have a look. Unlike his previous watches that were a seamless confluence of several watches, colours aside, this is the most faithful watch that he has ever created to just one particular model. We are, of course, talking about the Omega Admiralty. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does feel slightly more like a homage watch compared to something more original like the 1962. The Superluminova is not the best in the world, mainly due to its diminutive amount, so kind of forgivable, but at least the differentiation in colour is a great touch in design to help highlight the orientation in low light. Then we have the ghost date on the no-date automatics. It's not just an audible date change, but there is also a ghost position on the crown. Again, not the end of the world, but it had to be mentioned. I recommend saving the extra cash if you want no date and going with the quartz, which are all no date. The overall 1970s aesthetic and use of vivid Doxa orange, along with the retrolicious index handset, typical of Omega of that era, will unquestionably turn some people off. This is in fact the newest watch he has ever designed, and I mean that in terms of its name. Everything else was based on something pre-1975. That bezel action, it's so accurate and ooh yeah, ooh yeah, it lands perfectly. Just listen to that. Is my mic picking it up? Yeah. Personally, the matte porcelain white combined with the creamy blush white sapphire loomed 120 click unidirectional bezel variation worked best in my opinion. My wife really loved that one. It's easily the star of the show. But for me, I enjoyed the automatic with the black dial and date, along with the brushed steel insert. The way the modern seconds hand is complemented by pops of orange on the dial and date are very clever and wonderfully illustrates his playful attention to detail. The rubber is super comfy and on my 6.5-inch wrist wears absolutely perfectly. I even like the Cyclops, which inevitably will turn many off, but Omega did do this to several of the Admiralty watches back in the day. To finish off the watch, Dan once again features a wonderfully detailed, high-polish relief, contrasted by bead blasting, this time of an octopus in a diving helmet. Its meaning I am not entirely sure, but I suspect something connected, like all his previous watches, to the year this collection is named after. I think the gold applied marker dial variation clashed to me. I think orange with, the pop of orange with gold, it just doesn't work. And also the bezel insert wasn't as legible as the others because the gold wasn't always visible in low light. Maybe it's just my personal taste. Without a screw down crown, it still manages to maintain a pool/beach /Champers drenched movie premiere with Hugo level of water resistance at 150 meters, which is perfectly usable. Ultimately, this all translates to an all-round fun everyday watch. I adore the utilization of the rarely seen Seiko Mecha Quartz caliber VH31 with the smoother sweeping motion, which is around 14,400 vibrations an hour, giving it actually quite a mechanical look and feel. But you get the quartz accuracy, the grab-and-go ease of quartz, and of course the natural toughness. And quite honestly, I totally forget it's quartz half the time. So most shockingly of all, for the first time, I don't have to complain about the watch being too big. Added to that is the relatively small lug-to-lug size and that thinness. Oh, they wear masterfully well. Yes, the larger wristed guys, I'm gonna feel a little left out. Yeah, see what it feels like? No, I'm just joking. Well, in conclusion, I love the compact size. Today, a lot of brands are remarketing their 36mm watches back to unisex on their websites and no longer listing them as women's watches. This watch will be a great unisex crowd pleaser for the scale, but aesthetically, only time will tell, especially compared to the timeless elegance and classicism of, Well, let's say his 1937 sector dials, for example. With sapphire glass, exceptional finishing and quality for the money, the redoubtable Miyota 9017 in the automatic, with its high sweeping beat rate of 28,800 vibrations an hour, hacking, manual wind, etc., all for $430, Dan Henry continues to offer amazing value. The quartz is just $270, and interestingly, almost the same as the MoonSwatch retail price. A very subtle but kind of classy middle finger up to Amiga, in my opinion. He could have done the easy thing. He could have done a different Seamaster or more predictable, you know, like a sub. But no, he doesn't go the easy route. He took quite an obscure watch. Not everyone knows the Admiralty, but this is a brand designed by a watch enthusiast, not a corporate committee. That makes all the difference. You feel the love. It translates into the final product. Dan on his blog has always been very critical of the watch industry. We share a common view about the death of true watch journalism, the result of platforms turning into watch sellers and compromising their passion for watches in pursuit of maximizing profit. This is nothing new, but as a truly independent watch channel, I deeply respect what Dan is doing. This once again helps people on a budget, also invites new watch enthusiasts, but also those who perhaps don't want to spend an arm and leg but want an Amiga Admiralty. He's always the best option. Can't say this, can't say that, no. Oh, can't name names. I know it's the truth, but listen, I can't say any of this, can't say any of that. He remains the Colonel Kurtz of the watch world, out there, accountable to no one, led by his own love of watches. He is an industry innovator and outsider, out there doing his own thing, and that is why he is one of the best micro brands out there. And the scale of this new release just proves this. A certified pure class capolavoro. The world undoubtedly needs more Dan Henrys. But beyond that, it's also a refreshing change from your go-to options like Orient, Seiko 5, Casio Citizen, and all the AliExpress stuff. Okay, so a massive thank you to Dan for lending these in. I really appreciate the time. I think at the end of the day, it's great functionality, super comfortable, but fun, and that's what it's all about. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this. I might go for the Date Automatic. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think it's a hit or a miss? Please do share that in the comments, opinions, all that good stuff. Please don't forget to like this video. Very important indeed if you want to see more free, independent content like this. It's the best way to support the channel. Onwards and upwards, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.